Very good evening to you folks. Thank you very much indeed for joining me again on another shit episode of my Wastecast. This evening I'd like to do just a little bit of reading for you. I've written quite a shit article which you'll probably hate. The subject matter is very, very important. It's all about unlawful detention. At the moment we live in a state where you can be locked up without trial by a bunch of people who probably won't, but could just make up a whole load of waffle about you, who actually could be anybody, who could put all your medical details and your medical records in wrong. You could be bundled into the back of a van by some strange men, taken off to a hospital and have a needle full of drugs forced into your body, which could make you feel dreadful and even cause you serious medical harm. You also might be taken miles and miles away from where you live, or where you don't live, if that's what's been put onto your medical records. I don't want anybody to get scared about seeking help with your mental health. If you do have a mental illness, or you start to feel depressed or anxious or stressed, or a bit more worried about your life than you normally should, then I would say speak to your GP, speak to your friends, speak to your family. Say, I'm having trouble with my mental health, I'm not feeling right recently. And do reach out to get help, because it's always there and there's always somebody willing to listen, even if it feels like there's not. So please don't take this the wrong way. But the law needs to change, in my opinion. And so I'm going to read you off my phone something that I've written. It's an article which hopefully I'll put into proper format. I'll finish it and then I'll put it into a document so you can download it from a link in the description. But it's called Unlawful Detention is the devil we know, but one we simply can't identify. Just like criminal prisoners detained by the state, those locked inside the UK's psychiatric hospitals under the guise of requiring ongoing assessment of their mental health are protected by a legislated framework to ensure everything is done properly and have inalienable rights, right? Well, occasionally things do happen at psych wards that aren't, strictly speaking, legal. The nature of these misdemeanours can vary wildly, but there's some circumstances where a detention under a section of the Mental Health Act can, in fact, be unlawful, although everyone still behaves as though everything's all right. Established legal firm MS Solicitors define an unlawful detention in a UK mental hospital on their website. An unlawful detention is one attributable to the state which has acted without valid legal authority. Although this statement seems fairly self-evident, in fact the lack of provision in the Mental Health Act to enshrine a detainee's right to establish that valid legal authority is in place is, with a little insight, quite frankly absurd. MS Law's FAQ page reads, "When does your placement or admission become an unlawful detention? If you're kept in a hospital or a care home against your wishes without the proper steps being carried out, i.e. not under mental capacity or mental health law, then this may amount to an unlawful detention." Mental health. Judged as a risk to self or others. If this applies, then you should be detained under Section 2 or 3 of the Mental Health Act 1983. The necessary paperwork must be completed and you have the right to appeal. They rightly exhort that the necessary paperwork must be completed. However, in practice, the law supporting patients' right to actually see their own paperwork presents an oversight so unfathomably visceral it almost defies belief. Occasionally, this necessary paperwork isn't correctly completed, making MHA detentions unlawful, but incredibly, detainees simply have no right to verify this themselves. As ridiculous as this may seem, it's the way it is. Sections are essentially, and majoratively, under either Section 2 or Section 3 of the MHA, and these last a periods of 28 days or 6 months respectively. The thing is, the Mental Health Act 1983 just doesn't actually say anywhere that patients themselves have any entitlement to access their own section paperwork in order to identify that they are actually sectioned. The Mental Health Act Code of Practice, Section 6, has lots about IMHAs, independent mental health advocates' right of access on request to copies of medical records, but nothing else to indicate that there's any legislative guidelines which support a patient's right to access the relevant paperwork over and above that covered by GDPR. The documents in question confirm patients are detained using powers provided by the Secretary of State and consist of 5 to 10 sides of A4 with various endorsing signatures. In addition to section paperwork, a medical legal scrutiny checklist completed by a third party confirms the approved mental health professionals have done their job properly when detaining a patient and so possess, as the law advocates, valid legal authority. But, as this forms part of medical records, by law, patients don't have a right to verify this is in place immediately or during their detention either. NHS DPT's policy document M14, entitled Receipt and Scrutiny of Detention Papers, details the Trust's policy on medical legal scrutiny checklists being completed. Great care and attention to detail is appearingly applied by NHS Devon Partnership Trust to ensure that due process is adopted regarding the detention of British citizens under section, with the onus on the lack of scrutiny checklists impacts on the law emphasised on page 1 of the document's heading. Under the Mental Health Act, detention, aka section papers, must be received and scrutinised correctly by authorised officers of the Trust so that patients are detained lawfully. As mad as it may sound, you can be locked up without trial in a matter of hours, and even though the eventuality of this coming to pass totally illegally happens with such frequency that law firms specifically advertise services to cater for it online, there's simply no safety net for innocent civilians which sets out any route by which they can get out of psych wards they shouldn't be in once the doors close behind them. This is to say, unlawfully detained persons can't leave simply on the basis there's no grounds to keep them, because they have no way for them to prove it. Yes, there's redress and compensation for those unlawful detainees who bother to follow it up afterwards, but the fulcrum of the issue is that the only way to assess if you have been correctly, lawfully and legally detained, notwithstanding hospitals choosing to agree to an early disclosure, is by using GDPR. Subject access requests are governed by the Information Commissioner's Office, which puts a 1-month time limit on information being provided once requested. So, assuming patients put their best foot forward and submit a formal SAR to the detaining party on day 1 of their detention, a person could still be detained for 28 days illegally without knowing it, during which time the hospital can claim to be processing the SAR within the allotted time frame. This is only assuming that hospitals don't provide detention papers and accompanying scrutiny checklists to patients voluntarily, which I'm certain does happen. The thing is, if there has been an unlawful detention, then the people involved might not want to admit it. The Crown Prosecution Service defines unlawful detention as a form of false imprisonment, which carries a maximum sentence of life in prison for those caught facilitating it. This responsibility usually vests with the hospital managers, MHA administrators or registered mental health act nurses who are responsible for ensuring each patient admitted to their bed wards possesses all the necessary legal documentation. If the detention papers aren't valid or if for any reason they haven't been scrutinised, it's members of the team the patients are requesting documents from who could end up in jail. Of course, my previous assertion that paperwork could be released to them via SAR after UK detainees are discharged, allowing for retroactive litigation, is in a sense one potential best case scenario for unlawfully detained patients. As the ICO doesn't actually do anything to companies who breach their deadlines in any real sense, even those who make the formal request but remain detained under Section 3 up to 6 months can end up waiting months on end only to find out that they might not have been lawfully detained anyway after having submitted an SAR. At the time of writing, I've been detained for over 4 months without any valid section papers being provided or their accompanying medical legal scrutiny checklist. I've asked countless times and have been given a variety of excuses. I've previously been detained under Section 3 for several months, only to find I myself had no medical legal scrutiny checklist applied to the paperwork from the MHA office. I've actually got these section papers just in a little blue folder over in the corner of my room. If anyone wants to come and see those, you can see that. Over the last century, psychiatric medicine has had a lot of bad press, gaining a reputation more historically for providing a vehicle for censorship, oppression and abuse. With the help of good publicity and the reduction in stigma surrounding mental health, things have improved. But when all is said and done, if there was something dodgy going on in a hospital, with the current legislation, there's simply no way to verify what might have been apparent from the outset had patients had access to the most basic validation of their status as a psychiatric inpatient. Speaking from experience, if you do try to phone 999 or 101 from a mental hospital with concerns about the legitimacy of your detention, you're swiftly informed that issues arising from detention under the Act should be dealt with via a solicitor, as they constitute a civil matter, who in turn only provide assistance with MHA tribunal hearings for free, covered by legal aid and nothing else. One potential reason for this is that most people who are in mental hospitals should be there on inspection, So even though there could be a crime which is criminally as serious as murder taking place, it's permissively ignored by police call handlers, as police seldom follow up on "this is absolutely outrageous, I'm being detained by a bunch of criminals for no reason at all" reports. Any patient could claim that the hospital keeping them prisoner doesn't have valid legal authority, but the assertion should always be considered baseless, as if they see fit, police can simply instruct patients to apply to gain access to their medical records via GDPR right of access and to cease wasting their time, allowing the hospital to simply refuse to provide evidence of their own crimes. Unlawful detention, wherever it takes place, is a serious crime. The problem is, with the way the law is now, it's impossible to confirm in a binary criminal context until months after the incident, if you're lucky. As I said, I'll try to put a link to that article in the description so that you can download and read it rather than having to spend 10 minutes and 54 seconds of your life listening to my head talking at you. But I would say that the law definitely needs to change. Sorry the audio's so crap on this video, my mic's packed in today and I'm just using this lovely little webcam. But I hope everybody's had a fantastic day. 11 minutes, I could probably talk about something else for 11 minutes. What's been going on today? The audio broke on the TV in the front room and everybody was sort of smirking and asking about that, and then the audio broke on my microphone, which was kind of a little bit funny. I don't really know if that was a funny coincidence. I don't think that there's anything else that's been particularly significant that's taken place. I had some chicken for tea, paprika chicken, and I had some toast for lunch, for breakfast even. Still haven't heard from the police with my phones. Still got these emails here. Hopefully they'll get back in touch this week and I'll get my normal phones back so people can phone me. You can still phone me on the ward phone. If you want to phone me on the ward phone, then you're welcome to do that. And yeah, I'm just enjoying all the sweet joys of being in this fantastic hospital room. Have a lovely day, and I hope you liked my amateur journalism. All the best.